So this event took place about several years ago. I was in Mississauga somewhere at a gas station because I was low on gas and I needed to put some gas. And there somebody says, "Father Peter, is that you?" I said, "Well, yes, it's me. Do you remember me?" I honestly couldn't remember the gentleman. He goes, "When you were in Mississauga, I used to come to your church. Listen, I don't always go on Sundays, but I do go sometimes. I've always liked you." And then he goes to tell me how him and his wife is going to be celebrating this beautiful anniversary of their wedding, and they were planning this long trip to Europe. And he goes, he had a beautiful 1980s Ferrari, red color, and it was a convertible. And then he goes, "Well, I had a neighbor who used to take care of my car when I would go away, but he moved. So I was just wondering, do you want to take care of my car while I'm gone?" It's like the insurance paid for, like my mechanic says it's in tip-top shape. I will even reimburse you for gas. It's like, do you want it? And I was about to say yes. I was going to say yes, and I realized, wait a minute, let's just play this through in my head. A priest driving a Ferrari. A bishop phones and says, "Father, what's going on?" I said, "There's no way I'm going to get out of this one." So I said, "Okay, well, thank you, but I'm a priest. When I became a priest, I promised to live simply and to be chaste and obedient to the bishop. So thank you, but no thank you." I remembered who I was. Have we forgotten who we are? Do we know who we are? And do we know who we are called to be? How far are we away from the people that we are called to be by God? The people of God in the Old Testament, as well as at the time of Jesus, did people forget who they were? Absolutely they did. Do you remember when the people of God were miraculously led through the Red Sea, and Moses, just was at the cusp of entering into the promised land, and it was his time to go. He passed. And Joshua takes over. He says, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Choose which God you will serve. Are you going to serve the one true God, or are you going to assimilate and serve the gods that people from the promised land that we are about to enter worship?" And people say, "Yeah, we also will worship the one true God." Between covenant blessing and the curse, people chose the blessing. But what happened is that they promised to be faithful to their term of the contract, so to speak. So every seventh day is a Sabbath day. It's holy unto the Lord, you should rest. And every seventh year is the sabbatical year, Shemitah. And therefore they had to rest, but they didn't. And at the end of the seventh Sabbath would have been the 50th year, which is the great year of Jubilee. All debts should have been forgiven. And all the land that you bought from the people were given back to the people there in the ancestral land. It was not important. But they didn't. For the entire 490 years of their existence in the promised land, they did not become faithful. They're disobedient. And therefore, 70 years is what people owed to God. And that's the exact time that people served in exile. There's a beautiful psalm. I'm sure some of you might even remember because there's a song made out of it as well. Psalm 137. "By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and there we wept when we remembered Zion. On the willows there we hung up our harps, for there our captors asked us for songs, and our tormentors asked, saying, 'Sing us one of your songs of Zion.' How can we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land?" And that's how they felt. They felt completely demolished, demoralized. They felt they were abandoned by God, forgotten by God. They didn't know what was happening. But God promised that the people of God are not forgotten. In fact, that they are God's favorites. And God will bring them back. Do you know the difference between planting something and bearing something? It looks the same. You dig the dirt, you put something in, right? But the difference between bearing something and then planting is when you bury something, that's the end. There's no future. That's the end. But what happens when you plant a seed, plant things? There's a future. Whatever was planted will grow, and it will bear fruit. And that's exactly what God wanted. The fruits of all the blessings, the prosperity and health and protection, and all of that was supposed to be the fruits of obedience. One thing people forgot was their own identity, their relationship with God, and their commitment to being obedient to God. That's the one thing that people of God forgot. I remember some years ago in the seminary, there was this older priest who loved to tell stories. And as we're having lunch one day at the seminary, this priest kept on telling us one story after another, and we all listened. It was very interesting. I remember the story that this one priest told. And he goes, once upon a time, there was this man who owned old and stubborn donkey. And there's not much you can do when the donkey is so stubborn and doesn't want to cooperate and doesn't want to do anything. So as a result, this man goes, you know what? I have old, dried up well in my backyard. I'm just going to bury him alive. Asked two of his friends to come and carefully lowered the donkey. And then with their shovels, they started to, fill it with dirt. An hour has gone by. What happens? They see the donkey coming up, looking through. What happened is that the donkey refused to be buried alive. So every time there was dirt, it was shaking up and stepping up. That's what the donkey was doing. Shake up and stand up. And that's what God is asking all of us. Do not remain buried. God didn't bury you. God has planted you. God has not forgotten you. Whatever God does so with His loving plan and loving purpose.